it really does ultimately is says, wow, we get to recalibrate ourselves right here. And that in the background, way below consciousness, the CNS is observing itself to start to, I call it heading for the cliff of all the crap we do to ourselves. We're all filled with various vortexes and attractors of crap we do in our head that get us stuck. And when that occurs, the feedback that people are watching visually and auditorially gets interrupted when the brain starts to enter a state of turbulence and instability. And what that really does is evokes in the brain the orienting response. Much like Martin was describing, it's the finding a better way to run itself. And that's pretty automatic in the central nervous system. I call it an autologous process. It's automatic and completely individualized to the person doing it. So there's no protocol from the standpoint of saying we're trying to push the brain in a particular direction. What really is happening is by observing, the brain observing itself, it automatically starts to return to this moment. And in describing the sympathetic arousal, the fight or flight response that we're all programmed to do, as the brain arrives right at this moment, usually it's a more comfortable place right here. So what we're really doing, this training is about returning to this moment, which is usually pretty nice, and opening up this space to be present right here. Now, people who meditate or exercise or take a drug to go up or take a drug to go down are pushing our states consciously and unconsciously to get to a certain place. What we're doing in neurofeedback training is allowing the central nervous system to explore its own internal recalibration effort. And this occurs without regard to wanting to do it. You can do this with someone in coma. You find where the brain has any activity. With that, you put a big strobe light in front of somebody's eyes, and where there's the tiniest little increase in activity, the strobe light starts to go. And that starts to loop through the brain, and over a series of sessions, the brain begins to recruit itself out of coma. So it's that basic and that unconscious. People who meditate very quickly say, okay, I'll go to the state where I go to where I meditate, and then this goes quite well, and people say, gee, I wish I'd had this early on in my meditation because I get a feel for that, for getting to that place much more easily and can maintain it. I had a long-time meditator who said, even in her first session, she said, boy, this is like what it takes me 3 days on a retreat to get to, but I can get the feel for this right here. So that is kind of based in whatever people are doing that they're doing well tends to take a hike, because that if people have, as Gladwell says, takes that 10,000 hours of practice to get mastery in something. What this does is dramatically accelerates that process, because it's helping this nervous system to keep building the pathways that people are working very hard to do. The kind of ultimate state, people say, okay, well, what state should I get into? Ultimately, this is to find the state of no state, to be merely present and to let go of efforting, of thinking, of trying to make something happen. So the feedback part is really directed toward the unconscious part of the brain that's, of course, always running my digestion and my blood pressure and breathing and everything in there, to explore a more complex calibration of this. This is really about complexity training. The most complex brain is the least burdened brain. And a thought is a burden to the brain. A thought is an allocation of resources to get ready for the big one that's coming, or something even pleasurable. And so that the release from that burden is then I'll say we're extricating myself from the constraints of my past history and my pathologic vortices. I'm extricating myself to arrive right here, and by re-arriving right here, the feedback, the interruptions are saying, okay, you're heading for the cliff to go back into all the stuff I go back into. To hold this then opens up the possibility for all possibilities that have yet to be presented. And in that state, things that are symptoms, things that are inefficiencies, tend to disappear. Symptoms that people have had. People will say, you know, I keep forgetting to drink. People who are in AA, you know, I just keep forgetting to drink. I keep the recalibration is that people are more attracted to things in their best interest, less attracted to things not in their best interest, kind of automatically, and symptoms will just drop out. We put 2 sensors on the scalp and ground and reference on the ear, and there's a great deal of pre-processing that goes on in the preamplifier. So the instruction is really to just watch. People are asked, there's really nothing to do when we're measuring 8 on each side, 8 overlapping frequency ranges on each side. The worst part is the goop here that we use to electrode paste that allows the signal to be transmitted down here. And this is part of the feedback, is sort of an amorphous visualization that gets interrupted in terms of its complexity and its forward movement whenever the brain kind of hits a speed bump where it starts to enter a state of turbulence and instability. See, already it's good. Say again?
Sure. Yeah, you've done so.
Yeah.
He's also scared. Try, I'm scared. Good luck.
Going to, we've got that right there. Okay.
How does it feel?
Pardon?
Fine.
Like those sort of dangly earrings, I guess.
Yeah.
Mhm. Now, okay. Now, what we're seeing here, this is the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. Brain activity from 0 to 42 cycles a second, left and right. Here's the delta, here's the theta, here's the alpha. The big yellow stuff is, here's low beta, high beta is where all the cognitive busyness goes on. And this is a brain just humming along. Looks like a pretty good brain. And what I'd like to do is to grit your teeth together once. Just bite down on your teeth. See that if you have a kid with 8, now see if you can grit your, just on the right side. Good. Then your left turn signal. Very good. Okay. Here we're doing biofeedback right here, having him literally learning the muscle activity from the jaws connected to the scalp muscles. So we're doing a little biofeedback experiment here. You get a wiggly kid who's ADHD doing this, and they're screwing around with it all the time. And what you really will watch after a while is that just begins to diminish. Now you can see here just settling. Very nice.
Do you mind if I just close your eyes for
Yeah.
Before you do that, don't relax yet. Keep your. What I'm going to do is I'll do what we do kind of formally in an evaluation. Is what I'd like you to do is to just watch this for a little bit, and then I'll have you close your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So just watch here, and don't either try nor yell. And now allow your eyes to close, please. Okay, then we'll save this, go to the analysis screen, and then what you're seeing here is the left hemisphere activity, right hemisphere activity, the time, frequency from 0 to 42, and then the intensity. So here, when I asked him to close his eyes, what this is this little burst here. Closing the eyes brings a burst of alpha activity in the brain because the brain is disconnecting from visual processing. Now you can see this happens there's a little burst of it here, it goes away, a little bit bigger burst, and then it quiets down, and still another one. This is literally the brain unhooking from visual processing. And that's a very dynamic process. What we're looking at is, in the data rich part of this, is what happens when a state changes in the brain. Some people, when they close their eyes, there's a huge explosion of activity up here. And that the change in state is difficult for a dysregulated brain. Now the principal pre and post measure we use, this is a measure of turbulence and instability, and you can see here it's kind of bumpy. This peak here, about in the middle, this is a peak of a thinking, curious, busy mind. And you see that peak. I took this to the American Psychological Association convention last year, and all the graduate students came by and they had these huge humps, and I showed that to the professors saying, that's the way we want them. We want them to have these great big humps up here in the thinking range, but that then gets exhausting. So this is what we do as a pre-measure. Now what I'm going to do is back out here. This is what is really going on in the training here. We're looking at these on each side 8 overlapping frequency ranges, and those people are hearing. You can use a DVD or any audio recording. Whenever you see it bounce out here into the orange, there's an interruption in the visualization and in the auditory activity, which is to say, okay, your brain is starting to go off into, and you can see there's a certain kind of pattern to this already. And then the idea is whenever you hear that, you just let yourself kind of bring your attention back. Now the training here, the purple circles constitute the activity on the right side of the brain. The blue circles constitute the activity on the left side of the brain up to 58 hertz. Now you can see this beginning to make almost like a helix pattern. it's beginning to settle into what we could call sort of a lawful pattern. And that literally is the brain beginning to feel out its own balancing act. A dysregulated brain, now I will phony this, grit your teeth together once. You'll see that just kind of flare out like that. A kid with ADD, ADHD, you'll see a good deal of this more kind of, now, so you see it all of a sudden, see that settle, all of a sudden. This is a good brain, keep this brain. Don't trade this in, lots of good miles left on this one. This is, you sort of see here, like all of a sudden, and in the training, people watch this and sort of enjoy, you're kind of literally getting your head together. This is the brain itself, getting its head together. And we use earbuds usually so that the precise, you won't be able to hear the precise, these are very tiny interruptions. In developing this system, we would have quite a bit longer and more intense interruptions. Just keep doing what you're doing. That's very nice.
What am I supposed to do?
What are you supposed to be doing? Nothing. The more you do of nothing, because we just watched, you just kind of settled. You were looking at that, and automatically there's like a pull into this, arriving at this moment, being just here, doing nothing. Well, really, the ultimate piece here is the state of no state, which is a step beyond meditation, which is meditating on one thing. And, Americans are doing very well if we can just think about one thing. But this is even beyond that, because it's about something. Now, we used to make it that whenever any orange was showing here, everything would quit. And in meditation, there's what they call the Roshi stick. The Roshi watches the monks meditating, and as the monks start to nod off, he goes over and taps the monk to come back. This turned out to be a Roshi club for a brain. When everything was stopped, it was much too jolting for the nervous system. So we were looking for what's the most minimal intervention that reminds the brain to just come back here. And we watched you kind of automatically settling your brain in, even though I'm chattering here. Just watch that. And kind of automatically, the brain starts to fall into a better organization. Every brain is looking to do this. And for the first time, we're giving the brain information about what it's doing right here. And with very little training, there's about 20% of people after a first session of this say, wow, I feel different. I feel clearer, more present. Much like people who've meditated, I'm present and grounded. Over time, that state of being present in the moment starts to be carried out in everyday life. And the brain, people will come in and say something like, people have to work harder if they're going to ruin my day. That it takes a greater perturbation to knock me out of a sense of being present and it's not in control, but I'm more deciding when I leave the space of this good place. And all sorts of efficiencies happen in that, is that the departure to be distracted takes a bigger distraction to take me away from what I'm doing. And so the tendency is just to keep returning to here. Now we're about 6 minutes. We've done 6 minutes of this. And what I'm going to do is ask you once again to just watch here. We'll do another baseline here. Yeah, you can just watch this one. And now allow your eyes to close again, please. And you can see this alpha happen here, that burst, then it went down, another little burst. Okay. Let's save this. We'll go to the analysis. And we'll go up here to this one. Now you see here in just 6 minutes, you know, in front of everybody, this amount of turbulence and instability settled here. If we look at the numbers here, this is really an algorithm of turbulence and instability from 53.69 to 18.04. If this drops about 50% in a session, that's a really good session. That's why you just watch this brain sort of settle. So here's a brain that, given a chance, sort of is leaping forward to do what it most needs to do right here at this moment. This is really training in letting, however the brain shows up on a given day, explore, okay, what do I need most to do to take care of myself? A lot of kids will come in and they'll go right straight into sleep. These are kids who are, say, coming down off their ADHD medication after school, and boom, they're ready to go down. They'll go to sleep for about 10 minutes, and then back up they come and do very well. The parent is usually antsy because I'm not paying this money to come in and have the kids sleep. I want you to get them awake and pay attention here. But what we're really doing is letting the brain by itself is going through the cycling. And the people who are fascinated to hear about segmented sleep and Zeo work that's going on. Literally, the brain is learning how to take a power nap. And so the efficiency of sleep is one thing that happens. Efficiencies accumulate in people who are on medication. Very quickly, people give evidence of being overdosed on their medication very quickly with this, because the central nervous system is starting to do for itself what it previously required medication to do. And that goes as far as people who've been on, say, thyroid medication for years. And suddenly they're overdosed on their thyroid medication because the CNS, you never know where the benefits of this are going to show up, because every nervous system has its own hierarchy of things that it will set to right, and it chooses where it's going to go. And anything that you predict will happen in this. The things that you can't predict that people come in and talk about are much more interesting and much more far-ranging than, say, any symptom that got them in the door, like sleeping or anger control or whatever. So this is what a session looks like. This is, that's what I said right away. That's a good brain. It's leaping to sort of get itself together just by hanging out here, just by watching this. And then we have this huge drop in the post-reading.
Cool. Maybe we can, I want to break out soon into the informal sessions. So maybe,
Great.
If you don't mind setting up here, if other people are curious about the system,
Sure.
or trying it out, or have questions, they can come up and get their brain to look at it. Great. This is really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.